Spiritual awakening has become the socially acceptable excuse for giving up, or so they want you to believe. But what if the real cope isn't the people disappearing from society, but the ones desperately clinging to it? What if Jung was right, that staying visible once you've truly awakened isn't strength, it's spiritual suicide? There's a mass exodus happening that nobody's acknowledging, and if you're reading this, you're probably already feeling it, that unbearable pull to vanish, to dissolve, to finally stop pretending you can tolerate what's become intolerable. The most conscious, awake, and psychologically developed people aren't just leaving society. They're hemorrhaging from it, bleeding out from wounds nobody else can see. Not dramatically, not with grand announcements. Just gone. Deleted accounts, abandoned careers, relationships severed like infected limbs. And you? You're told you're broken for wanting the same. Weak, antisocial, a failure. But Carl Jung saw what you're experiencing. He called it the necessary withdrawal, when participating in collective unconsciousness doesn't just feel wrong, it feels like psychological torture. Not metaphorically, actually viscerally, somatically agonizing, like your soul is being flayed alive every time you smile at small talk, every time you pretend their concerns are your concerns, every time you perform normalcy while screaming inside. Here's the devastating truth they won't tell you. The moment you truly wake up, not intellectually, but in your bones, staying in the collective world isn't just painful. It's a betrayal of everything you've become. You're not imagining it. You're not being dramatic. You've become a living contradiction to everything around you, a glitch in their matrix, and the system is trying to delete you. But wait, isn't withdrawal just running away? Isn't it spiritual bypassing dressed up as enlightenment? That's what they need you to believe. That's the shame that keeps you trapped, performing your death dance a little longer. But Jung's psychology reveals something darker. This isn't escapism. It's your psyche's emergency response to being poisoned by mass delusion. It's not weakness pulling you away. It's the last functioning part of you fighting for survival. And if you want to understand why every fiber of your being is screaming to disappear, you need to see the hidden architecture of what's actually dying inside you. Feel that constant exhaustion that sleep can't cure, that bone-deep fatigue that meditation can't touch. Jung mapped exactly what's hemorrhaging your life force. Your psyche operates on two centers: the ego, that performing puppet who answers emails and remembers to smile, and the self, the vast totality of who you actually are, conscious and unconscious, the part that knows exactly what you need to become whole. Between them runs an invisible lifeline, what Edward Edinger called the ego-self axis. When it's intact, even suffering has meaning. When it breaks, you're living someone else's life in your body. And here's what nobody tells you. Modern life is designed to sever this connection, not through conspiracy, but through the simple mechanics of what it takes to succeed. You learn to identify with your LinkedIn profile. You mistake your relationship status for your identity. You perform the acceptable emotions, never too much joy, never too much grief, until something inside you, something you didn't even know could die, starts dying. Isn't this just burnout? The skeptics say. Take a vacation. But you know better. You've tried the vacations, the self-care, the therapy that tells you to adjust better. This isn't burnout, it's soul murder. When you wake up one morning and can't remember why you're alive, that's not stress. That's yourself sending a final distress signal before it goes permanently dark. Feel that visceral recognition? That's because you're living it. The constant effort to maintain a persona that fits while your authentic self suffocates. The exhausting translation between the depth you experience and the surface everyone expects. The agony of being awake in a room full of sleepwalkers who keep asking why you won't just close your eyes. Your withdrawal isn't pathology. It's your psyche's intelligent attempt to save what's left of you. The same way your body triggers fever to fight infection, your soul triggers isolation to fight spiritual death. It hurts. It's disorienting. It makes you question your sanity. But it's not crazy. It's the only sane response to an insane situation. And when this connection becomes too strained, when the gap between who you are and who you're pretending to be becomes too wide, life delivers the killing blow. The psyche doesn't whisper warnings, it detonates them. And if you're reading this, you've probably already felt the explosion. First comes the persona collapse. That moment when the mask doesn't just slip, it shatters. Maybe you're in another pointless meeting nodding at words that sound like noise when suddenly you can't do it. Not won't. Can't. Your face won't form the appropriate expression. Your mouth won't produce the expected words. Everyone's looking at you, waiting for you to perform your role, and you're sitting there realizing with crystal clarity, this person they think I am doesn't exist. Never existed. I've been puppeting a corpse. The skeptics will say, everyone wears masks, that's just society. There's wearing a mask, and there's the mask eating your face. There's playing a role, and there's forgetting you're not the character. Jung treated a renowned professor who broke down mid-lecture saying, I've been quoting myself quoting others for so long, I don't know if I've ever had an original thought. That's not burnout. That's the horrifying realization that you've been dead for years and nobody noticed, including you. Then comes the neurosis, but not the kind they can medicate away. Anxiety that grips your chest every time you try to return to normal. Depression that descends specifically when you're succeeding at what you're supposed to want. That crawling sensation under your skin when you're doing everything right. They'll prescribe you pills, tell you it's chemical. But Jung knew better. Your symptoms aren't the disease. They're the cure trying to happen. Your anxiety is your authentic self pounding against the prison walls. Your depression is your soul going on strike. Your neurosis isn't pathology. It's revolution. Jung said 1/3 of his patients weren't mentally ill. They were dying of meaninglessness. Their psyche was screaming, this life you're living is not yours. It never was. And the symptoms would only stop when they finally listened. But the most shattering catalyst is the Numinous encounter, that moment when the veil tears and you see too much, a dream so vivid it makes waking life feel like the dream. A synchronicity so precise it shatters your concept of reality. A moment of cosmic terror and ecstasy that reveals your ego as a dust mote in an infinite storm. Jung called these encounters a defeat for the ego. The skeptics dismissed them as hallucinations, temporary madness. But you can't unknow what you've known, can't unsee what you've seen. Once you've experienced the vastness of what you really are, returning to your small, performed life isn't just difficult, it's obscene. Like being shown the ocean, then asked to be excited about a puddle. These shattering moments serve one purpose, to break the old life so violently that you can never fully return to it. And once that door opens, what floods in isn't always light.
If this content is making sense to you, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support.
Awakening isn't ascending to bliss, it's descending into a more conscious hell. Because once your eyes open, you see what everyone else is desperate not to see. And what you see becomes unbearable. First, the seduction of inflation, spiritual ego on steroids. After touching something infinite, your ego wants to claim it. I see what others don't. I know what they can't know. It feels like enlightenment, but it's just your ego wearing God's clothes. The inflated person becomes insufferable, not because they're wrong, but because they're using truth as a weapon. They're not transformed. They're the same ego, just with cosmic ammunition. Jung called this the most dangerous trap because it feels like transcendence. But real awakening humbles you to your knees. It doesn't make you special. It makes you nobody special, which is far more terrifying and liberating. But inflation is nothing compared to seeing the collective shadow, humanity's disowned darkness projected everywhere. Once you've faced your own capacity for evil, integrated your own shadow, watching society's shadow projections becomes physical agony. You see it everywhere. The political party that's evil, the group that's the problem, the endless scapegoats carrying everyone's denied darkness. You realize most wars are just shadow projections clashing. Political divisions are mass hypnosis. Social media is a 24/7 shadow projection machine where people punch their own darkness while screaming about others' evil. And you can't unsee it, can't participate, can't pick a side when you see both sides are fighting their own reflections. Can't join the mob when you see it's hunting its own tail. But it's not just intellectual understanding, you feel it. Being in crowds becomes suffocating, not because you hate people, but because you can feel the unconscious material swirling, the projections, repressions, denied rage, all creating a psychological storm that only you seem to sense. It's like being the only person who can smell gas, while everyone else lights matches. This is why awakened people delete social media first. Every scroll is an assault of unconscious projections. Every comment thread is shadow boxing. Every viral outrage is collective darkness seeking a target. For someone who's integrated their shadow, it's like being forced to watch a mass psychosis and being expected to call it connection. Here's what Jung discovered that explains your exhaustion. Maintaining consciousness in an unconscious environment requires impossible amounts of psychological energy, and you're hemorrhaging it every second you stay. Calculate what you're spending just to exist in normal spaces. The energy to not react to constant projections being thrown at you. The effort to maintain boundaries against energy vampires who feed on your light. The exhaustion of translating between the depths you swim in and the shallows they paddle in. The strength required to hold your frequency while surrounded by static. The labor of processing not just your unconscious material but everyone else's leaked shadows. For unconscious people, this isn't work. They're floating with the current. For you, you're swimming upstream in a tsunami of unconsciousness. Every interaction demands you pretend you don't see what you see. Every conversation requires you dim your light to match their darkness. Every relationship asks you to betray what you've become. Jung saw his most conscious patients develop chronic fatigue, autoimmune disorders, mysterious illnesses, not from personal pathology, but from the simple physics of consciousness. You're spending more energy than you're generating. You're dying by 1,000 unconscious cuts. One patient, a teacher who'd awakened, developed crippling fatigue. Every medical test came back normal. Through analysis, she realized she was expending massive energy maintaining her consciousness while surrounded by unconscious colleagues and students all day. She wasn't sick. She was being energetically cannibalized. When she quit and moved to a cabin, her energy returned within weeks, not from rest, but from no longer being drained. This is why your body is screaming to withdraw, not because you're weak, but because consciousness is precious and finite, and spending it on unconscious interactions is like pouring water into sand. Your exhaustion isn't depression, it's depletion. Your inability to socialize isn't social anxiety, it's energetic self-preservation. Society calls it isolation. Jung called it the crucible where fragments fuse into wholeness. Isn't being alone unhealthy? That's what they need you to believe, that your solitude is sickness, not medicine. But conscious solitude isn't escape. It's the arena where the real work happens, where the psyche can finally speak without being drowned out, where opposites within you can clash and merge without anyone telling you to just pick a side. Jung discovered something radical: the capacity to hold the tension of opposites without resolving them. When you're torn between loyalty and freedom, certainty and doubt, most people collapse into one side for relief. Society rewards this, but the psyche doesn't grow through quick resolutions. It grows through sustained tension. In solitude, this tension doesn't drive you mad. It makes you whole. The transcendent function activates. Opposites don't cancel out. They birth something new. A third option your ego could never have imagined. Wisdom your performing self could never access. This is what you're actually doing in your withdrawal. Learning to hold a massive psychological tension without breaking. When society polarizes, you see both sides as partial truths. When others project their shadows, you metabolize that projection internally, so it doesn't explode into external violence. You become a psychological lightning rod, grounding collective electricity before it starts fires. One of Jung's students described it: I used to have passionate political opinions. Then I integrated my shadow and saw they were all projections. Now when I watch debates, I see two groups violently projecting their unconscious material at each other while calling it truth. I can't participate. It would be like joining a mass hallucination. This capacity doesn't make life easier. It makes life unbearable and ecstatic simultaneously. You hold more tension than others can imagine, feel more deeply than they can tolerate, see more clearly than they can stand. Eventually, something shifts. Solitude has done its alchemy. The tension has birthed something new. But don't mistake this for going back. That door is welded shut. The return happens, but it's unrecognizable. So they just abandon everyone? How selfish. That's the accusation that keeps people trapped, performing their slow death a little longer. But Jung observed something profound. Those who fully individuate never return to the mainstream. They can't. Once you've touched authentic being, performing inauthenticity feels like suffocation. Once you've found yourself, living from persona feels like death. Once consciousness has awakened, pretending unconsciousness becomes impossible. They return to the margins, the edges, the spaces between. They become what Jung called border dwellers, present but not participating, available but not absorbed. They might return as healers, but only for those undergoing spiritual emergency. Artists, but creating from depths that can't be commodified. Teachers, but for the few ready to be destroyed and reborn. Writers, but offering maps for other disappearing souls, not mass market comfort. One therapist who withdrew for 2 years returned to work only with people in spiritual crisis. Her practice was tiny, invisible to the mainstream, but for those shattering, she was salvation. She couldn't do general therapy anymore, only work with those experiencing what she'd experienced. Not because she was special, but because she was real, and realness can only meet realness. This is evolution in action. The pioneers disappear first, create new spaces, then become beacons for the next wave. What looks like abandonment is actually architecture, building the structures for collective awakening when it's ready. So here's the bone-deep truth Jung understood. Your withdrawal isn't weakness. It's the most powerful thing you'll ever do. From the outside, it looks like failure. Career destroyed, relationships ended, social life evaporated. But from inside, you know the truth. The psyche has declared independence. It refuses to spend one more second on masks, on projections, on unconscious games that are killing you cell by cell. You're not crazy for being unable to tolerate what others call normal. You're conscious, and consciousness requires different conditions than sleep. You're not antisocial for needing to withdraw. You're following an archetypal pattern older than civilization. You're not abandoning society. You're saving the only part of you that could ever truly serve it. Feel that pull to disappear? That's not pathology. That's evolution. Your psyche knows what your ego is still learning. You can't birth the new while maintaining the old. Can't become whole while performing fragmentation. Can't find truth while speaking lies. Let yourself disappear. Not forever, but completely. Find your Bollingen, whether it's physical solitude or psychological distance. Stop hemorrhaging your consciousness on unconscious interactions. Stop dimming your light to make others comfortable in darkness. Stop translating your depths into their shallows. Your disappearance isn't selfish, it's sacred. The collective doesn't need more participants in its unconsciousness. It needs people who've touched truth, even if that truth makes them temporarily invisible. It needs depth more than surface, authenticity more than performance, consciousness more than conformity. You're not leaving the collective. You're pioneering where it will eventually need to go. Your withdrawal is preparing something. In your absence, you're creating presence. In your silence, you're gestating words the world isn't ready to hear. In your solitude, you're becoming what the collective desperately needs but can't yet tolerate. The spiritually awake are disappearing because awakening requires it. Not from hatred, but from love so fierce, it says, I must become whole, even if that means being alone. I must find truth, even if that means losing everything. I must become real, even if that means disappearing from everything false. Your disappearance is not abandonment, it's evolution. And evolution doesn't ask permission. Trust the pull, trust the withdrawal, trust the death of who you were. Something is being born in your absence, and when you return, not if, but when and how you choose, you'll return with gifts that could only be forged in the fire of conscious solitude. You'll speak truths that could only be found in silence. You'll offer medicine that could only be brewed in isolation. The collective needs you to disappear so you can return as what you really are. Not who they need you to be, but who you actually are. And that terrifying, liberating, agonizing truth, that's what Jung knew would save us all.